All right, welcome back, everybody, to the GBL Podcast. Again, my name is Shibarizu. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm joined by some very special guests tonight. We have the EVO episode. It's going to be discussing early talks about recent EVO developments and what we can do. And I'm joined by a very special guest today. But first, let me go through my co-host, Alien. Say hello.
What's going on, everybody?
Protodad, say hello.
Good evening, everybody.
All right, D, how you doing?
I am doing good. How is everyone here?
All right, we're doing all right. So I've heard. And Mike, say hello.
Hello.
All right, Mike. Good to have you. If needs very little introduction, I suppose, for anybody who's played a fighting game in their lives in the last, 10 years. But we're here to talk about EVO, the EVO episode, and I want to preface everything by
preface.
Preface. I want to kind of round everything by answering a question. Yeah, that's true. I did. I want to start by mentioning why now, right? EVO is in July 31st, August 1st. I don't know if that's going to change, but I assume it is not. And we're here to talk about EVO well in advance. Specifically the EVO episode. Why am I not doing the EVO episode a week before? Why am I not doing it a day before? Why am I not doing it when they announce all the lineups and people can register? Because I think that if we're going to have this discussion and anything comes of the discussion, we need to do it now. Because these things take a really, really long time to put together. One of the things that generally happens is that people have this complacency about EVO or the plans EVO makes that there's no influence to be made, right? If you talk about EVO, that their plans are set in stone. So I know that for certain aspects of EVO, for certain aspects of the community that it has to volunteer, that isn't necessarily true. There are things that are going to be accommodated. There are things that have to be talked about now and they have to be talked about early, because if this thing's going to be done in any way of quality, we need to talk about it now. Now, I'm an optimist. But I'm not going to say that the objective in having these talks or having these streams is to talk, we need to do this thing. We have to make this crazy optimist, utopian vision of EVO where all the games that have good online have amazing tournaments. That's not necessarily true. That's not even necessarily viable. So I need to ask as many people as I can. I need to have it torn apart. What can we really do about the situation, right? So Mike, I appreciate you coming onto the show, of course. And, the reason I ask you to join is that Skullgirls as a project, right, Lab Zero Games, has put just a ton of money and time into GGPO, into NetPlay. I mean, recently, you guys have been shipping updates.
Less
and they've
money
been...
than time, but yes, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, sure. I mean, you guys tell me, right? Just a ton of resources, manpower into Skullgirls as a product for online play, right? And the question is, after all of these efforts, and I don't know if you can answer this as a yes or a no, or maybe just something that, we'd have to really discover and see if we can do. If your game is one of the examples of the genre doing netcode right, which I would assign it would be, can we do something on the scale of EVO with it online? Is that feasible? What do you think?
I mean, I'm one of the people that remembers back when EVO was just a giant bracket without pools until Keats proved that pools worked. So I would be the first to say that, on the scale of a modern EVO is an undertaking of its own, regardless of how you try to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And in person and online both come with their own shortcomings, right? In person, everybody has to get there. You have to be at the place you're supposed to be. You have to provide physical setups. You have to police everybody doing the right things. They have to be where they're supposed to be on time. The logistics is a nightmare. It's a little bit easier to do that kind of thing online, but you have a new set of problems, which is, what if the person is a bot, right? What if the person registers twice and you can't find out? What if the person plays on Wi-Fi? What if they want to sabotage their connections, right? There's a lot of different problems, but I don't necessarily think that it's a different scale of problem, if that makes any sense, right? It's there's this much in person and there's this much online, and they're not the same problems, but there are as many of them in both ways. It's just that they have a lot of practice at this point doing the in-person version.
Okay, yeah, I agree
Um,
with that.
I definitely think that it is from just a specifically logistical standpoint, right? It is possible to run an online tournament with a game that uses rollback netcode and have results that the community is satisfied with, provided the players don't intentionally attempt to sabotage things.
Okay.
Enforcing that is much harder, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great opener, as a matter of fact. Because and I mentioned Skullgirls. I think I have to harken back to Quarantine Rapport, which was a 200-man Skullgirls bracket, something of that matter. I wasn't involved in that bracket, but they did great, so I've heard. Shout out to Vestboy, who's here in the chat, head TO of that. And they're most likely going to do it again. I heard there's a pot bonus for the next one. How many was it? Not 200. It was some large amount. He's giving me a link, but I don't know, guys. There was a very large tournament, I guess by the standards of your average net play, but we're talking about something on the scale of EVO. Even something on the fraction of a scale of EVO would be potentially much larger than anything that we could put on.
Well, I do want to point out that unlike in-person tournaments, scaling up an online tournament, as long as you have the resources to like report scores, is no different from running a small one, right? You don't suddenly need a ballroom and 500 setups,
right?
Because everybody has their internet connection. So if 10,000 people want to enter, as long as you can do the score reporting part properly, it's not any different from running a smaller offline tournament, a smaller online tournament, right? Because you don't have to cram a bunch of people in a room and you don't have to have different setups and whatever. And you can actually run, in theory anyway, every match from a given level of a bracket at the same time.
Right.
Okay.
So again, it's not a larger amount of logistical problems. It's a different set of logistical problems.
Okay.
Yeah,
great.
that's really the truth too. I've hosted my fair share of online tournaments as well, and just a lot of the challenges that you see online that you don't see a whole lot offline. Because I've hosted a lot of events online and offline. Is winners bracket tends to be over pretty quickly in an online environment, and losers bracket tends to be playing catch up a lot because a lot of the mentality is once you get sent down into losers bracket in these online events, these people like to step away and go do things, and then on top of having more rounds in your losers bracket to work through as opposed to your winners bracket, then your people who are even if it's a smaller one, your people who are in like your winners finals, winners semis, your top 4, top 3, they spend a lot of time waiting. And they're going to spend a lot of time waiting in an offline environment too, but it's more spread out, so it's not quite as noticeable, I don't think.
Well, I was going to ask, couldn't some of that be mitigated by like actually doing the thing where you run every step of the bracket before you run the next winners match?
That's true. Yeah, there's definitely ways to mitigate that as well. For smaller stuff, the stuff that I generally run, because right now I've been running stuff for my local scene here. We're localizing everything into the Tampa area, so we're usually getting between 16, 20 people, coming out and playing.
Sorry, I'm going to eat my beautiful sandwich.
Go for it.
Please continue.
That is a beautiful sandwich. Yeah, but so it's one of those things when people are all on it, because we know pretty much everybody who's in that chat, who's in that bracket, and we're letting those people go ahead and report their own scores.
Mhm.
We've settled on challenge, but Smash GG also has a when it works, a solid way to play online brackets with self-reporting and all, and that
Mhm.
definitely helps a whole lot of it too, because there's no waiting for a setup to open up, which is
Right.
nice. So
I was going to say that like one of the things that I've seen online tournaments do a lot more than offline tournaments is they tend to just stream winners,
Yes.
which is one of the reasons why winners ends up done much more quickly, right? Because
Yeah.
you can, even in an offline setting, you can just run the whole winners bracket and no losers matches, and then you're in real trouble, but it's possible logistically.
Yeah.
I see that happen a lot more in online tournaments because there seems to be the like assumption that they don't want to make the winners wait because they don't have to. But if you actually treated it as like slices
That's
rather than
that's how I
separate
do it.
brackets, right?
Yeah.
You don't end up with people waiting forever to play their next match. I mean, you end up with them waiting like a whole slice, but they don't end up waiting much more longer than that because they need to be around sporadically, but like in line, right? The winners don't stay there for half an hour and play and then don't play for 3 hours. They play every 10 minutes instead, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense for especially for like larger stuff. For the smaller stuff that I run, we usually do a cutoff at semis.
I've personally, just speaking from experience with what I do, I always go by vertical slice. I've never done like a winners only stream. Like we have to do the lower half of the top 8 like in any given situation. I just think it makes sense, and I think people. I personally, I mean, like I like watching losers bracket. Going up into the top 8 side of things. It's like, oh yeah, these guys are gonna work their asses off to get up to the top of the tournament. Of course, I want to see that, right? It's just generally more interesting to me, but that's just like my criteria as a spectator.
It seems to keep people engaged more. That's what it feels like, because you're like, okay, next up, this guy's gonna face this guy, so we have to keep an eye on what's going on. It definitely keeps you more engaged, I think, because if you're just watching the winners, you kind of get bored and like, okay, I want to see what this guy in losers bracket is gonna do next, but I gotta wait an hour to see that, So I think it just keeps you more engaged.
You also don't get to see people fighting for their life, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
For sure. Tournament life.
It's way more desperate.
Yeah, that's where it really comes from, right?
Good word.
You got your favorite competitor, about to get knocked out of the tournament. You definitely want to see like, oh man, he's up next, or whatever. So
Yep.
it definitely keeps you more engaged, I think.
Okay, well, it's good. We talk about tournament organization because I think that's kind of crucial, right? I think that as you mentioned the same thing that I think regarding online tournaments. Like logistically, they're different challenges, and one of the things that kind of worries me is that not everybody is aware enough of that in terms of like you grab a bunch of offline tournament organizers. They might be the best in the world. You put them in an online setting. How much of that are they aware of? Or how much of that are they necessarily prepared to deal with? Right? Like there is a level of I guess. Knowledge that needs to be transferred over, but isn't necessarily 100% applicable online to offline or vice versa.
Keeping people on deck is really important and difficult online.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not even just the organizers; it's the competitors too.
Yeah,
if you get a lot of people who have never played in an online event, and because it functions, it's similar, but it's not quite the same. If you get a net play tournament where everybody who's just always online, and this is pretty much their main method of competing, that bracket's going to go by so much smoother than if you try to round up all your offline people to get them to do an online bracket. Because I still have people who come in from my scene who don't know that they can report their own score.
Yep. We did, I guess I got to take the time to plug this because this is one of the big bonuses of doing an online tournament, since you have basically infinite setups, right? Is I came up with a stupid tournament format that actually has worked out pretty well, which is that the winner's bracket is normal, but the loser's bracket is Swiss.
Okay.
And what that means is that you don't go 2 and out and then watch, right? You play for the whole tournament, even if you're in losers.
I like that idea.
And it was really difficult to run until I wrote a program that helped us run the losers bracket, because running a Swiss bracket where you add people in every time with a new score is like not possible on either challenge or Smash.
Right.
But that's something you basically can't do offline, right? And I'm not saying that EVO would do this, although it would be pretty cool for pools. But you can run a tournament where everyone plays the whole time, which is a lot more engaging for the people that are probably not going to win from the get-go.
Right.
And you like doing that offline would require as many setups as there are half the number of people in the tournament, right?
Yeah, and I think it makes it worth your while more, right? Because if you get knocked out in the tournament, you probably just turn off the game and stop playing, just watch. But if you have it like that, you can continue playing no matter what. So it keeps you involved in what's going on, and it's a cool story to tell. That's what I think. I think hey, I kept playing. Like, yeah, I'd lost, but I kept playing. Like, for some reason, like they just had it set up this way where we just kept playing, and I had a lot of fun. I met a lot of different people. They told me about how they lost and the experiences they had. So I think it makes it more of a community, actually.
Yeah,
honestly,
I mean, go ahead.
I think honestly, I think a thing that it really helps on the player standpoint for Because sometimes you just end up having a bad streak or really bad seeding, and that's just a wrap. So like if somebody would get eliminated in that situation, they could possibly make that tear, and all of a sudden they're back into it, and it's way less discouraging in that manner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry.
it's great that we can do crazy formats. I mean, because just the level of simultaneous setups that you can get. I mean, it's great, right?
This online event will be performed under the free ratio system.
Yeah, we have to get
right?
a free ratio group plug in there. This is on the stream. We have to do it. It's the way it is.
Since we're talking about it though, you do really like end up trusting the players a lot more in an online setting.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I think a bunch of the memes that came out of the FGC are how do I put this nicely? Because the games that many people play have terrible online implementations.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
Like you can't play people who have ping above 60. You really don't want to play against people on different continents. You don't want to even play people on the other half of your continent, right? Like
you don't even want to see
that,
4 bars.
Yeah, like that stuff can be almost completely mitigated with rollback, right? Like the point of rollback is you can play without delay on yourself. So online immediately feels a lot more like offline, and a lot more of the skills transfer over. You don't have things like, I'm just going to do this and you won't be able to block it because there's like, I know you probably know this, but like the way that online works, there's actually double whatever delay is given to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, because
Things
you
that are
have to
random
react
will
to the
become
visuals.
unblockable.
Yes. Well, the thing is, you react to the visuals, right? But the visuals are delayed from the other person's button press. So if there's 4 frames of delay on both of you, and they press the button on frame 10, you see that start on frame 14. Let's say you have a perfect reaction time and no delay at all there, which no one does, but anyway, so you see that on frame 14, you react on frame 14, your reaction doesn't come out until frame 18, right?
Exactly.
So your reaction is doubly delayed by whatever the delay is from their actual input.
So in summary, you didn't block Greed Sever, which is...
in summary, you didn't block Greed Sever, you didn't block Ken's Stamfierce V-Skill, right? You didn't block Bandit Bringer. You didn't block any of that stuff.
You didn't block any of that stuff.
You
didn't block Laura V Skill 1. She's already in. You didn't even have a chance.
And like the point, so I think the thing that many people that play online don't really understand, and which is why we got so many memes out of it, is that when you play in an environment that doesn't add delay, a lot of that goes away. Right, because a lot of it, like a lot of blocking things on reaction, isn't actually specifically reaction. Right, they're probably going to do this here. All I need to do is confirm with myself and the visuals whether they actually did it. It's not like they're running around choosing randomly from any move, and one of the things they can pick is Greed Sever or Gauntlet Hades. Right. It's that there are situations in which they're likely to do those moves, and you need to know whether they did or didn't. You're not choosing from the whole list. You're choosing from a subpart of the list, but one of those parts is that thing that you really have to care about. And
it's a much more educated guess.
Yeah. So when I guess the difference is when there are rollbacks, even if it rolls back to like 4 or 5 frames into the move that has 12 frames of startup, that's enough time for you with 0 delay on your own character to be able to block it on reaction, because it isn't 100% reaction.
Right.
Right. It's confirmation of a thing that you probably thought might happen. And that, I think, is the bit that's really hard to explain, but that's also the bit that makes like every part or every bit of difference that can be made in online play. Like when you don't have to deal with that extra recovery on your own inputs, it makes the whole online tournament thing feel way more plausible. Because then it can be like, okay, the connection can drop, or there could be, one or two rollbacks or whatever, but it's not like everything you do is a giant disaster from the moment that it says round one fight.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's so terribly important that we do these things. I mean, like,
there's only one way to find out.
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, it's so terribly important that people see this thing at scale, because most people will probably watch, I don't know, Ronin Rumble. Love those guys, but they're running Grand Blue at scale. That I think the largest scale that I've ever seen anyone do it, and they have these problems, right? They have frame delay. They have reactable setups that just become unreactable in their VODs because the whole game changes, right? And when considering EVO scale for these kinds of things, apparently people said, you know what, we actually can't do that. I recently saw that Pat the Flip, who was doing Exard for Anim EVO, said, I'm not doing it online at all. He's not doing it because he knows that at scale it's a different game. It's not going to work. There's going to be too many issues for them to logistically deal with, right? For whoever he and his bracket runners are going to be. So he said, I'm not going to do it. If somebody else wants to do it, they can, right? So, I appreciate him taking that stance personally, because we have to grab those things. Go for it. What you got?
I have a question, which is, Pat the Flip is a smart guy. How much of that do you think wouldn't work for the game, and how much of that do you think is, I don't want to be associated with something that might blow up?
Exactly. No, you're right. Okay, yeah, you're right. Like, how much of that is one, the players are gonna have a bad time, right? I mean, if you're able to disconnect yourself from the fact that the game you're playing at that given moment is EVO, right, and you just play your Exard Rev 2 net play, right, then it's no different from me challenging my friends who live in Europe, like, hey, you want to play this? All right, we'll play that. It's not great, but we'll make do. And but that's going to be all over the internet. People are going to look at these things. They're going to say, "Oh man, this is not this is not good," right? So yeah, it makes sense, right? That a lot of tournament organizers who are involved with these games that have just this atrocious net play setup say, you know what, I don't want to be attached to these kinds of things. Even if all the players agree, let's not take this thing too seriously. Let's just have our net play. Let's just have it. Let's just do it. We're talking about a lot of people who are going to look at this thing, right? Like, and that's why
they're not going to just look at this thing, but they're also going to be looking for this thing. Like, the instant anything goes wrong, it's going to blow up by an obscene amount.
Oh yeah,
right. And you aren't able to prevent that either. Like, it is virtually guaranteed that at some point there will be a disconnect in a match that's on stream, right? Because the internet is public, and you're going through backbone servers and things, and there's no guarantee of anything. So it is statistically probable that will happen. It's just, how much of an impact is your community willing to let that have, right? Like, I think a lot of the reaction from the top players was more, I don't want to play in something online because it's such a different game experience, rather than, I don't want to play in something online because it might have online problems, right? Like, I don't want to play this online because this stuff becomes unreactable, or like, because all my offline practice means nothing because now I have to do everything with different timing, versus I don't want to play online because, like, it could randomly disconnect me or whatever. Like, those are going to be hilarious when they happen. But looking at the reaction from the Skullgirls community, or like the Garo community, because Garo got net play or got rollbacks recently.
Yeah, it sure did.
Like, looking at the reaction from smaller communities, so there's two parts, right? One of them is, oh my goodness, the game might actually be included in EVO, and I'm over it. The other part is, yo, our community is totally down for this, right? Like, if Skullgirls had delay-based netcode, I'm not certain that the community would be excited about it being included in an event like this, right? Because they'd be like, well, I don't think I want to play a tournament for this online. Like, I just don't.
Yeah.
Right. But the people that have been playing Skullgirls, the people that have been playing Them's Fighting Herds, the people that have been playing Garo and like Samurai Showdown 5, realize that it's actually good enough to do something like that with.
Yeah.
Right. You can. I think the concern from the community standpoint isn't necessarily the logistics or the terrible internet connection or even the cheating. It's that for a lot of games that have delay-based or otherwise not quite perfect online implementations, you can't have gameplay of the same caliber when you're playing online.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the main deal, right? That's the thing that rollbacks and allowing the people to choose the delay lets you do. You can do the same setups. You can react to the same setups. You can deal with the things that are normally undeal-withable online. And I think that's the main reason why the communities have different viewpoints, is because the Skullgirls community looks at this and goes, yeah, it's totally
Let's do it,
playable at this point, right?
Yeah. And here's another interesting thing that I haven't been able to find a concrete answer yet. Is EVO charging for entry to this online event?
Okay. Yes, they are.
They are?
Yeah, I
Yes,
believe
they
so.
are. They are. This comes
Is that
from
really known?
Yes, it does come from the EVO Twitter. I'm not even quoting things I know. I'm just saying the EVO Twitter said that their online, the registration fees for their physical event will not be transferred to the online event. That you cannot have your buy-in transferred to the online events that they have planned. Which just goes to me. They're saying it could mean nothing, right? But to me, everyone kind of said, "Oh yeah, you're gonna have to pay to get into this thing."
Well, that statement could mean a bunch of things, right? It could mean I don't even know how much EVO costs anymore. The $150,000. I mean, I haven't been since 2015, so it could mean your registration fee won't carry over, and we're going to have another registration fee. It could mean your registration won't carry over, and we're going to have another registration that's free, right? It could mean we don't want to carry over everyone's registration from in person because we don't know how many of those people still want to play.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to charge for it. I would be willing to bet they probably will, because that is how they survive.
I was gonna say that even if you assume that they're doing this all for free and that they don't need to worry about the money, I don't know if that's true. I would say they should still charge anyway. Why do I say that? Because people keep worrying about like, there's gonna be 10 people in a bracket. I saw like a Twitter meme that was like a whole empty bracket on Smash EG, and it's just one guy going up to the top of the bracket because all the rest were like DQs. If you want to stop that to some capacity, make people pay for it, right? Like you have to. If somebody wants to troll the bracket and put in 5 entries and all of them are them, they're gonna pony up like what, $50 at least if you put $10 entry in a small bracket or something like that. Like
that's
just
honestly, sadly, very true.
That's just the only way that we walk away from it. Like cheating, it's so easy to set up a Smash GG for free that you have to involve a cost here.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that even if it's not about cheating, if it costs money, you're more likely to show up.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
Because like we ran free tournaments at a bunch of events all the time, and like you get 100 entries and 40 people show up, right? Because they're busy doing something else, or they were out eating dinner or whatever, and they're like, well, I didn't pay for it, so it's not that big a deal, right?
Yeah.
So if you charge people for it and that money goes into the pot in some form, then at the very least, those people that don't show up that make a problem for the people running the bracket are making it better for the people that do show up.
Yeah,
right?
At least they contributed to the prize pot, yeah.
So I agree, like, it's going to be really strange for them to charge for an online thing, because at that point they're basically charging for the brand, which I guess $700 fight sticks, they're charging for the brand anyway. Sorry, EVO people.
that was a real one.
But yeah, the thing is, they basically should charge for it, even if people would rather prefer that it's free, because charging you for it means you're more likely to be serious about actually entering.
Yeah.
And like that's the best thing that you can do to guarantee that people care in some way, other than like strictly enforcing like your pool starts at this time, you're either there or you will be DQ'd, right? Like the other thing that you can do to make it run smoothly is enforce that kind of stuff. Because in a local, it's never like, oh, well, he went to the store, they'll be back in like 10 minutes. It's been 20 minutes and they're not back yet. Like, you don't really want to DQ someone.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of a jerky thing to do for a local. But if you're doing something on that scale, then it's like you're either there or you're out, right?
Exactly. I mean,
or you like let the TO know that you are being taken to the hospital or whatever. Like there needs to be a really good reason for it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think it goes without saying that, like, even, anyone who wants to compete is going to have to understand that there's going to be standards. I think that they're all kind of aware of this. Like, the only people who would legitimately be like, oh, bro, you don't have to DQ me after I waited 30 minutes to show up to pools, is like, they're just here to ruin everyone's day. Like, I think at that point, the mentality of an online event is kind of like either you're with it or you're not, right? Like, people are either here to compete or they're just here to fuck around and see what what trouble they can cause. And I think that goes a lot into player mentality. We already kind of touched on the topic that I have here of player expectations, which is like, well, if you're from the rollback camp, you want to play, right? You want to play, and there can be money involved, but you want to play, and you're probably going to have the same setups, and you're going to be ready to go, right? And you're going to be pumped for it. And if you're playing a game with, poor online connection, you're like, oh, you know what? I don't necessarily want to do this. The game's going to be completely different. There's going to be tons of issues that I don't necessarily want to have to deal with. People get tilted, man, after like one disconnect or one bad game in an online environment, and I get it. Yeah, exactly. I get it, right? And it's, now that you mention it, price tag involved for some of the things that they're gonna have to be dealt with. Like, man, people are gonna be real voicing their grievances. Even though that's just what we need to get this done. People are gonna be like, oh, I paid $10 to go 0-2 because I got a disconnect. Like that may not be the whole story, but that's what they're gonna say, right? Which is really what matters, I think, in terms of perceptions.
Yeah, but people do that. Okay, I'm going to interrupt here for a second, which is people do that anyway.
Of course.
Like, man, I paid $50 and I showed up and I went 0-2 because the person next to me was screaming or knocked into me with their elbow, or I didn't make sure my stick was good and my stick broke or whatever. It's like, at some point, it's a poor craftsman that blames their tools. Like if your internet sucks and you enter an online tournament, it might happen to you that you get a disconnect and you're out.
Yeah.
That sort of comes with the territory. There actually is something we didn't cover though, which is if you have an event like EVO in one place and everybody shows up to it in one place, they're all in the same time zone by the time they get there. Right?
Yeah.
Which sucks for the people that aren't normally from there, and they'll usually arrive early and stay up late and try to get rid of their jet lag and whatever. But like 4 p.m. people will attempt to adjust to make that 4 p.m. by the time they're actually supposed to play their match. Whereas if you do something like this, and because you can do it in SG, right? You can play US versus Japan, you can play US versus Europe. I mean, my test case for the GGPO branch improvements was I played our other programmer in Europe, and he's one of the better Skullgirls players in the world, and we played like one match, and it was like, this is so much better that we have to go back and try the real game because it couldn't have been that much of an improvement from the thing that we just did.
Okay.
But when we actually played the set, it was nice because I got to be mad at the play rather than mad at the internet, but also it was 3 a.m. for me.
Yeah.
Right. And it was midday for them. So you're just like, at some point you have to pick what's convenient, and then other people are going to either like it or lump it. But time zone is definitely a thing that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
There's a minimum. There's a minimum of 3 hours that you'd have to deal with, even if you decide, okay, only Americas. Let's say for some reason they say, okay, the vertical slice of the world that we're going to use for EVO is the Americas. So there's a minimum of 3 hours already there. I'm sorry?
Nothing. Don't worry about me.
Oh, okay.
Nothing I say is ever important.
Let's say they say, okay, minimum of 3 hours, and daylight saving time. Maybe somebody has a weird time zone, like even me, right? Like, you do have to deal with that, right? I think that even if a game, because I know what you mean. Like I frequently have online tournaments where one person overhears from Europe, right? So they play. It's 2 a.m. They're playing though. They're just playing. That's just how it is. So people who see this online event, oh, it's free, I can sign up, or it's $10, I'll sign up. But it'll be at 3 a.m. when they're competing. Who knows how much time they're necessarily going to have? There might be people who just disconnect because they don't have the time, right? Like, it'll be hard to really set aside your calendar for a whole day when that day that we're talking about starts at like the middle of the night and goes into like maybe 7 a.m. right? Just to get through a certain portion of it, right?
Well, and also delays adversely impact people in earlier time zones much more, right? Like, I'm in Cali, and if the tournament started at 11 a.m. for me, which is 2 on the East Coast, right? Because if they started it at like 8 in the morning for me, like, screw it, I'm not gonna be up for that. But that's just me. But if they started it at like 11 and they did the whole thing where it goes all day, and then there ended up being delays or whatever, and it went until like 9 for me, that's not that bad for me, but that's midnight for the people on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Right.
And like, that kind of sucks. So it might be a better format to break it up into multiple days where you're doing something in what is the middle of the day for almost everybody involved. Yeah. If possible. I mean, I don't have any idea what their plans are at all.
I've heard suggestions. I don't know what they're gonna do, but I've heard suggestions of like entrant caps. I've heard some people who've been interested in doing like, all right, we have to have a set up regional system because this thing's gonna be too crazy. Like, maybe we'll get the EU guys to do an EU bracket or something like that. We'll get the US guys to do a US bracket because at that point the time zones make sense. I'm talking about communities who don't have netcode problems. I'm just talking about people who are like, honestly, with the amount of people who are going to be playing, it's going to be a nightmare to get everybody to connect at the same hour. So just get a decent time zone for different people, I guess, right? I have previously said that if people didn't... I said this in regards to some people in the Smash community being like, oh, I don't want regionals. I want people to connect at a global level. I want to see global competition like I do with my offline majors, even though that isn't necessarily the case. They just have that impression of like a global competition. I'm like, well, honestly, if you guys don't like that stuff, you guys need to complain to your developers because that is not for anyone to choose. That's just the only way you can run these things.
We've tried.
They've tried many times.
We've tried.
Some of them do.
Some of them do.
Not Smash developers.
Yeah, but not.
Can I digress for like 2 seconds?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. Let's assume half the people in the fighting game community watch EVO, right?
Yeah.
That's probably a low number.
Yeah.
If you consider yourself an FGC member. So EVO has, at the very, very, very outside, 500,000 views at once, right? Or like over the course of a day. I think it's more like 200,000, but let's say they have 500,000, which is a much inflated number. And that's half the people who consider themselves FGC members, right?
Okay.
That means worldwide about 1 million FGC members.
Yeah.
Okay. Now double that to 2 million. Now double that again to 4 million. Okay. Smash sold 15 million copies.
Yep.
Which means 4 million, which is doubling the doubling of the larger estimate of what the FGC might be, is less than a third of the number of copies that they sold. So for as much as they would talk to the FGC and do things that are easy for the FGC, they don't have to care.
No, they don't. I mean, I'm not saying I blame them.
Okay, yeah, this is going around to a topic that like I'm interested in really exploring, right? When I saw from the outset, when I heard about EVO Online, I said, okay, there's 2 possibilities, is what I said when I said this on my stream earlier last week. I said there's 2 possibilities. Either you have this disaster. I keep saying Pound Online because that's the one that showed up on my timeline last that drove me insane because I saw a bunch of Smash clips of like lagging matches, right? So you have that again, right? Because Smash Ultimate shows up, everybody has a bad time, whatever. Maybe there's one good clip out of a whole weekend of just like really bad clips being taken by people who participated. Or you, as much as it might hurt your pocket to do something like this, you decide, all right, well, let's just get games with good online and let's feature them over any of the other games because the other ones are going to have too hard of a time and it's going to be a huge tarnish on our reputation, maybe, right? That to have a disastrous online tournament when other online tournaments to date have been not having the same problems that we ended up having. Like, let's say they were on this huge EVO scale Grand Blue bracket online, right? It'll be a disaster. I don't think anyone here is gonna question that. Maybe Mike will. I know he probably questions me on a lot of things, but what do you think? What do you think needs to be done? Regard like what is the possibility that you think needs to happen? Not that will happen, but what do you think needs to happen?
Okay. So you skipped the third option, which was suggested tongue-in-cheekly by some people, but actually, like, might be feasible, which was declare that you're holding it somewhere, right? Like in a hotel somewhere. Everybody shows up at the hotel a week early. You have matches which are just the two people and a judge in the room. And then everybody gets quarantined for 14 days when they go home. Right?
That's insane.
That is logistically a possible thing to do and would result in not having an online tournament.
You're not wrong.
Sure.
Because you're avoiding there being 1,500 people in a room at the same time, which is the thing that you can't do. It would also probably transmit the virus among most of the people that are there, but we don't want to talk about that part. Okay, so I question one of your initial assumptions, which is how much it might hurt their pocketbook, right? Because if they were to announce, I'm going to have a Smash tournament online, it might not actually hurt their pocketbook to turn that into, we're going to have a tournament for Killer Instinct or a game with good rollback online, because a bunch of the Smash people just wouldn't enter.
Okay. They wouldn't enter, but would they watch? Right? Because, I mean, viewership kind of matters here, right?
Yeah, but it's EVO. And okay, this is going to sound really pretentious. So I'm going to put on my pretentious voice.
Go for it.
Right. So the reason that I personally think that EVO shouldn't include games that are not yet released when they announce that they're going to be in EVO or come out a month before EVO or got to change right before EVO, right? BB Tag having the EVO main game on the outside of the box when they're selling it in the stores, that kind of thing. The reason I don't think that's good is because the level of play that you get at EVO is low. Right? It's people practicing for a long time, but there hasn't been a lot of tech that was found. There hasn't been a lot of experience. You know, if the game's 3 months old, everyone has 3 months of experience, and that's it. Right?
Okay,
I can't keep this up.
Okay.
But,
yeah, it's quite.
I don't actually think that viewership would be as affected as you think by switching to games that perform well online, because the level of play will be as high as it would be for those games offline. And I personally, at least, will watch good people play whatever.
Okay.
And I don't know because the Smash community, like, do Melee players not watch Ultimate specifically because it's Ultimate, or do they go, well, it's Ultimate, so I'll tune in and watch it, right? Mm-hmm. Or do they go, okay, well, Smash isn't on right now, but, you know, BB Tag is, so I'll watch that.
Okay.
I don't know that the EVO Grand Finals for something would have significantly less viewership just based on what it is, rather than it not being the EVO Grand Finals of
Okay, so you
something,
think the prestige of the
sense.
event... Oh, yeah, okay, so you think the prestige of the event, if it could be anything, right? But the prestige of the event is going to attract viewers regardless.
Yes. Yeah. If you look at the viewership of the Grand Finals, I do have to say, so they did the thing where, like, some of the Grand Finals are on a different day, right?
Yeah.
Because they couldn't fit everything on Sunday, or they didn't want to have, like, 100 games on the giant stage and logistic all that. The ones on a different day received a smaller amount of viewers because there were a bunch of other games being streamed and it wasn't the EVO Grand Finals day and everything like that, right? But if you look at the viewership for the Grand Finals day, yes, they are different numbers because some games are more interesting to the wider audience than others, but it was never like 100 people versus 100,000 people, right? It was like 250,000 people versus like 210 or 190,000 people.
All right.
So I'm not sure, like, me personally, I'm not sure it would hurt it all that much to switch what game it was, as long as it's still the EVO Grand Finals of whatever.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now,
It's a headline that tells it.
Yeah.
okay,
Mhm.
all right, I see it. All right, because I mean, immediately when people started talking about this, like, okay, EVO Online, it has to have Third Strike Online Edition. I don't know how you would do that these days. You have to Third Strike Online Edition. It has to have Garo, which I mean, guys, if you don't know, Garo doesn't have spectate, so that's. I hope you guys like Fightcade that much, but Fantasy Strike, Skullgirls, Fight of Animals. I was one of those people. And like
I'm glad you admitted it, and you left out Them's Fighting Hurts.
I did left out
Just
them
saying.
for it's on my
And
graph on
KI.
Twitter. And KI, I love KI,
KI.
man.
And MK11.
Okay.
And MK. I
Does
have to bring it up.
Sugary 2 have rollback?
Yes,
What?
it does. Acceleration of Sugary 2 has rollback netcode.
Let's go.
Now,
It does.
Well,
I
and
wanna
also
ask a
Samurai
question.
Showdown 5 Special had it, right? That was the thing they did before Garo, wasn't it?
Yes.
I want to ask
BSB.
everybody here a question though.
Go for it.
Mm.
Say that in order to go ahead and sign up, right? Because if you're gonna charge people, right, there has to be some sort of legal binding to it, okay? Because if you're paying, but these are the terms and conditions to your signing up. I wanted to ask you guys, what if they required everyone? Because for example, now that everybody nowadays is mostly working from home, if you have worked from home or if you're starting working from home and you just signed a contract or got hired by a company, they usually ask you to submit a speed test to see.
Speed
Yes.
test doesn't mean shit.
Yeah, so
Right.
that is
I'm gonna.
So what if they asked people that wanted to sign up to do something like that and say like, okay, if your ping is, at least
This is a great question
150,
because we
if it's
just talked
150, you're
about
okay.
this.
But if it's over, then what are the parameters? Like how do they regulate the connection in a way where if somebody complains like, oh, but this guy was lagging, like, well, I mean, you signed up for this. It was written right there when you paid for it, right? So
Yeah.
what do you think what do you think they would do?
Okay.
The first question there is, how do you make sure that people aren't lying about whatever they tell you, right? If it's just like submit a screenshot of your speed test, like I'll pay someone $2 online to give me a screenshot of a good speed test. Speed test also doesn't matter at all. It has nothing to do with internet speed.
So that's a great topic because Mike himself just made a video regarding why speed tests.
Why Wi-Fi sucks.
Yeah,
Although
why
I do
Wi-Fi
gotta say,
sucks.
it's not actually interference. It's the fact that Wi-Fi is half duplex. Like, I said interference because that's the easy, like, you're explaining it to your parents' version.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody can understand what interference might mean, but it's not actually that. It's the fact that Wi-Fi, I'll give like the 30-second version of this. I keep meaning to record this as a video, so I guess here it is.
Go for it.
So normal internet connection or like phone connection is like a highway or a surface street. You have one lane of traffic this way and one lane of traffic this way, right? Oh, my face is so much brighter now. So cars go this way, which means I can talk to you and you can talk to me at the same time, right? The phone example is we can both be screaming at each other, and even though we're not listening, we can both hear that the other person is screaming at the same time. On an Ethernet cable, what that means is my computer can send data to you and receive data from you at exactly the same moment. Wi-Fi doesn't work like that. Wi-Fi works like a walkie-talkie. So if I want to say something to you, I have to say, hey, are you there? Over. And then you say, yes, I'm here. Over. And then I say, okay, I want to send you this data packet. My input is up and jab. Over. And then you say, okay, your opponent's input is down and short. Over. And like, that's true no matter what your Wi-Fi setup is, right? That is because Wi-Fi is on one frequency. And if you have, even if you had two frequencies so that you could do the crosstalk full duplex thing, if you had two devices connected, you would still have to break it up by time. So you actually need one frequency per device for it to be full duplex, or somebody has to come up with something way cleverer that no one has come up with yet. But all Wi-Fi works that way, and that's the reason that Wi-Fi is always going to be bad, because it doesn't matter your internet speed, right? Your internet speed over Wi-Fi specifically just turns you from like a normal person into the micro machines guy, right? So you still get 10 seconds to talk, but you can fit way more words into the 10 seconds. But you still have to wait another 10 seconds for your next turn. That's why speed test doesn't mean crap.
Yeah, you need wired. I mean, it goes without saying, right? Like we're gonna need everyone to get a wired connection for something like this.
And there are games that tell you whether you're on Wi-Fi, and I'm looking.
It's like a legal binding. Like, okay, you submitted this. You said that it was this. Now, you fit in with those parameters that we've set. So you're accepted to be part of the tournament. You know, like even if it was wired.
Now, I'd love to hand people red letters like it's King of Fighters. But
Yo,
like it's but that's just I mean, logistically speaking, I mean, I don't know if legally binding anyone to anything really matters. I mean, to me at least, when I run an online tournament, if somebody doesn't show up, you're disqualified, or if somebody's giving me an issue, just you're out. I'm done. I'm not going to put your match on the stream. I'm not going to fuss about it, right? I can't fuss about it. I can't make it a problem.
the way that you'd have to make those terms would be basically you pay this money, you're signing up for this tournament, and by signing up for this tournament, you are agreeing that whatever the EVO organizers say is final.
Yes.
Right? That's it. Those would have to be the terms. It would be you are agreeing to this tournament and you have no appeal whatsoever. And if they decide something and you don't like it, you agreed to that in these terms.
I think it should be like that.
There is no other way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm all about it. I think like just even in my small brackets that I take care of for the Fight of Animals community, like I'm not here to, make you guys like negotiate it. Like you're either going to play or you're not going to play, and I'm going to give you a certain amount of time that you can play, otherwise you're not going to play. Like it's just it has to be done quickly. And I mean, even the largest net play tournaments that are out there right now still take forever, even with all the benefits that we talked about earlier, right? We just talked about how you can have unlimited setups, how you can have multiple brackets run at the same time, how you can just have this incredible level of like everyone does their own thing. But even then, these things take forever. I mean, the human element of it is just a huge impediment, right, to being done efficiently. So I mean, I don't know. I don't know if policing
organized, especially now with Discord and all that stuff. You just ping the person, like, hey, you're up.
Yes.
And they're gonna be on their computer. They could be, probably watching something else on YouTube, and they just have it open, And I think it would be a lot easier to organize. It's the first time it's really being done on a major scale. So, there's room for a lot of failure. Obviously, one for the organization of the tournament, but also the games that are there. But I think there's definitely a lot more room for growth, especially when other companies and other developers start noticing, like, okay, we have to start preparing for this, because if this happened this time, God knows when the hell it's going to happen again, or maybe they might want to do it again as something that they want to, tackle in the future. We're in 2020, right? I mean, do you really think in 10 years that there won't be more online tournaments? Of course there's going to be, right? So, it's like a dry run almost. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, well, it's like here's the big thing that I wonder, which what's going to come out of all this. I think Shib kind of touched on this a little bit before. Some of these bigger devs like Bandai Namco and Capcom, who, Capcom's made a couple of strides to try and improve their netcode with Street Fighter V lately. But to me, like, I can't even play Dragon Ball Fighters. Like, I can't even play it.
We tried.
I've tried. I can't play that game because the netcode is so bad. I've got kids. I stay at home all the time. I can't play the game. Seeing these online issues, if they decide to run something like Dragon Ball Fighters in this online EVO, if that's going to blow up and maybe create some negative press towards these devs,
yeah,
to where even like, so like, if they're planning like a Fighters 2 or something, if they're going to start looking at more rollback based netcodes as opposed to delayed based. That's kind of my big question going into this EVO.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say I don't actually think more negative press is necessary in order for the developers to decide to do the thing. I don't think. Okay. I think that for many Japanese developers, because it's basically Japanese developers at this point, I've talked to some of them about why they didn't have rollbacks, even though GGPOs existed for like 14 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And a lot of it came down to two factors. The first one was that it's very difficult to add the save state, load state portion to a game engine. You have to dedicate a significant amount of time to doing that. And if your game engine wasn't designed around rollbacks, for example, if it was a 3D engine and you had the hitboxes attached to bones, which is a bad idea to do in the first place, but it's easier when you're starting out, so everybody does it. Then you can't roll back as quickly because you have to simulate the entire skeleton to get the position of the hitbox for each of the frames that you want to roll back.
Okay.
So the tech part of it is more difficult than delay-based because delay-based requires nothing, right?
Yeah.
It's just you implement an input queue and then you're done. The second reason was because in Japan, the internet is very good, most places, and the country is smaller than California, right? So implementing delay-based netcode where it cares about what your ping is, you get a delay of like 2 frames from tip to tip. And for a long time, it didn't matter what people from other countries said. It was only what did the Japanese players think. And in Japan, honestly, delay-based netcode is fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course it feels good. They're all right there and they've got good internet.
You could still get rid of those 2 frames because with rollbacks you can choose 0. But 2 frames is like moderately acceptable in a console port of something. The community will be upset about it, but they'll still play it.
Yeah.
So 2 frames online is like, okay, people will handle it if they have to. I think MK adds 3, right?
Yes.
But the tipping point for that was actually when the game started becoming more widely released in the rest of the world and that feedback started reaching Japanese developers. Like, Arc asking whether people wanted rollbacks in Strive means that they were already considering adding rollbacks to Strive, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't think more of a push is necessary. I think what's actually necessary at this point is the time for the developers to actually go and do it.
Okay.
I don't know. Okay, so if you were working on Dragon Ball Fighters, right, and you have your skeleton crew of people, you don't really have any programmers left. You have like a designer who can implement new characters. You have some animators and a modeler. I don't know whether it will be worth it to them to go back and figure out how to do save state and rollback in that engine if it's not remotely similar to Strive in the first place, based on how many sales they think they're going to get or whatever. I don't think any kind of outcry would change that math.
Okay. So
right? I think they already are aware that it's something that they should do in the future, and whether it's something that they should also do to the past is kind of up to a cost benefit analysis, very sadly, but
Yes.
it is.
I mean, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's super reasonable to expect a developer to go back and put rollback into an older title.
Say we as Garo gets it.
Say we. I think Arrow and the SNK titles are kind of an interesting situation, right? Because I mean, okay, all of those games, with the exception of maybe KOF 97, was released during a time where SNK's popularity wasn't necessarily at its apex. VSP is an excellent game. Garo's is a game. It's excellent, but it's a little different.
Wow.
It's but I mean, it's
Garo is the game.
It's just one of those things that, like, you know, people actually kind of like this game already. So if more people can play it, then we're probably going to get a lot more sales than we did back in the arcade runs of the games, because now everybody can buy it digitally, right? Like, that release strategy makes more sense to me than like, oh yeah, you know, we got to go back and, you know, revamp Dragon Ball Fighters, because that game already sold millions, was definitely making a profit, right? And everybody played it, so, you know, the money was made in that situation.
Yeah.
I don't think adding rollback to DBZ would significantly increase the sales in the future, because most of the people who bought it already bought it, and the only thing that it would do is like sell slightly more DLC to the FGC maybe, but you're not buying Goku 24 because their online is okay. You're buying Goku 24 because it's freaking Goku 24, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Dragon Ball, so.
No, yeah, I mean, okay, so this goes back to, I agree with what you're saying. Like, we do need time, and I haven't spoken to anybody in the Japanese development community about this, but I have spoken to Enway Games about this, and they said this. They said, you know, this game, when it comes out, it needs to have rollback, because there's literally no way that our analysis team thinks it's a good idea to not, is what, you know, that's what they told me back when I asked them. I was like, okay, well, were you guys going to do delay space from the start, and then did you decide rollback later? They said, no, my man, we were never going to consider selling the thing if it didn't have rollback. That's what I heard. That's what I heard from Shady K. That's what I heard from the guys over at Digital Crafter when they did Fight of Animals on release, they were like, oh yeah, there's no way that we can put this thing out without rollback. There's just no way. So I mean, I appreciate that mentality is going out there. Tell me.
I think I will say it is easier to do rollback netcode if you designed your game and your engine around it from the beginning, right? If you have an engine that's 20 years old, I mean, if you look at the Undernight engine, right, that's the Melty Blood engine, which is actually the Groove on Fight engine,
Yes.
Right.
So you have special cases upon special cases and like some variable out in the middle of nowhere that actually controls whether or not the players can block this frame, right? And you have to find all that and save it and load it and make sure that you're saving it and loading it correctly. And like, that's a large undertaking. And it is worth noting that it seems like French Bread thinks that that's important enough to go and do it.
Yes.
Right? That's the major part. Like, if you decided that your game was going to be rollback from the beginning, then you're thinking about how to put save states together while you're actually implementing the engine, which, spoilers, we weren't smart enough to do, even though we wanted rollbacks from the beginning. But you end up like building into your schedule that you end up like marking variables with like, this is game state and it'll be important later. So when we added GGPO to Skullgirls, it took about 2 weeks, and that's not a Skullgirls 2 weeks, that's like an actual 2 weeks, between not having any online and having mostly working with some variables that we didn't catch, GGPO from like single IP address to single other IP address, right? Getting over that hurdle of doing work is feasible if you decide that you're going to do it early. And I think at this point, it's enough of a topic that is discussed everywhere that all the fighting game developers are aware of whether or not they should do it, right? And I think the indication of that was the fact that Street Fighter V had it at all, right? They had their own implementation. It wasn't super great. They haven't really entirely fixed it, etc. But like, they knew that the concept was worth going for, so they went for it in their biggest possible title.
Yes.
I'm sorry, the cats are killing each other. Hey,
no, you're good.
Stop.
I mean, they went at it in 3 of their biggest titles to make success, but I mean, everyone still talks about MVCI's netcode.
Yep.
And
but to be fair, MVCI was never going to have the impact that Street Fighter V was going to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I mean,
it just goes to show you.
It's a great Marvel game, but it's not Street Fighter V.
Yeah, it's like the flagship of Capcom. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, for them to bet on that in their biggest game shows the shift in mindset of Japanese developers. I think at this point they're all aware that they should do it, and they're probably aware that they should have done it. So I'm not sure that a catastrophic failure would change any minds, other than possibly persuading them that it might be worth the money to go back and put it in like Dragon Ball. If there's a giant disaster and everybody's like, well, now this game sucks and they want to do another season, then they might consider putting it into their next season. But I don't think there's a single Japanese developer or other developer out there at this point that's saying, I'm skipping rollback by choice, right? Sometimes it's, I'm skipping rollback because we literally don't have the money to pay to figure out how to write save states. But I don't think there's a single company left that's saying delay-based is the correct way to go at this point.
Yeah, it's just a matter of it being, a standard now. Like you said, it just has to be standardized. At one point or another, it's going to happen, right? I mean, they're already aware of what they need to do. Some are doing it, but, maybe it'll take the biggest catastrophe, in online tournament history for it to be like, okay, this is why we need to make it a standard, because the future is going to demand it, and we don't want that to happen to our game, I guess. I don't know, right? I mean, we'll have to see.
I don't actually think it'll take a catastrophe. What I think it'll take is for large current fighting games to be excluded in favor of older fighting games that have the technology, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because that's a big low blow.
I'm not going to talk SG up, but I mean, at this point, now that it's been improved, SG has the best online out of any fighting game I've ever played, which I'm pretty happy about. But like, it would be more of a blow or more of a wake-up call, I guess, to have your game be skipped over by the organization because they just don't think it's worth the risk.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you have, because I mean, whatever else you want to say about Street Fighter V, everybody's heard of it. Everybody knows about it. It is freaking Street Fighter V, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if an event were to skip that, or an event were to skip Grand Blue, which just came out,
Yes.
in favor of an older game that has rollbacks, that says a lot, right? That is something that you can look at as an executive and think, okay, well, this might actually affect our bottom line, right? Because if they ran Grand Blue and it was full of disasters, if I were an executive, I'd be like, yeah, but we had enough muscle that they ran it. You know, we had enough pull.
We already sold 15 million
even though it
copies, so
sucked.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, it just doesn't matter. I mean, that goes into a discussion I had, I think about 2 days ago, where it was like, yeah, I mean, it'd be great if this happens, and the big developers at these companies, they say, maybe there's an executive out there at Nintendo, at Bandai Namco or something, who's like, you know what, this is not worth it. Who sees all this stuff and they're not worth it. And then it comes to their desk, they see this clip and they're like, wait, maybe it is worth it, or whatever. They see these bad reviews and you just see this tons of negative feedback. But in the case of like Smash, right, that game's bigger than EVO, at least in my opinion. Whether or not EVO,
any other fighting game.
exactly, right?
It's bigger than
I had this discussion about Mortal Kombat, and I remember I was saying that MK being excluded from EVO doesn't matter too much to NRS because they can put out a DLC expansion because they don't need them necessarily. They're still going to sell 1 million copies. That's true of Smash, and they're kind of the biggest problem.
I'm also going to interrupt and just say I don't really think any specific fighting game needs EVO to survive as a game. I mean,
oh sure,
SG never had it, and we did okay.
Sure.
So that's strange.
I guess I just look at it like in terms of evaluation of like whether or not they should be putting extended life cycles into the game.
It gives it clout.
I would say that the fact is that like Dragon Ball FighterZ kind of took a really long time to get updates, and I think just because of the fact that there was just every single major was running that game at the time, and even though there hadn't been any word of any patches, or they went for like this patch a year policy, which just turned out to be like PR excuses for what they were doing at the time, they ended up putting in more characters. They ended up implementing more seasons because there was just so much demand, right? There was so many people were watching, so many people were buying the game, so many people were playing it that, and that stuff's exacerbated by majors, right? These things happen.
Yeah, but then you ask the question, which I think is worth asking about both Smash and Dragon Ball, which is, were people buying Dragon Ball because they were watching it at tournaments? Or were people buying Dragon Ball because it's Dragon Ball and it's gorgeous and it's actually not a terrible fighting game like most of the other Dragon Ball games?
Yeah,
that's true.
Right? Are people buying Smash?
Yeah, it's
because it's played at majors, or are people buying Smash because you can punch Sonic with Mario?
I mentioned that the day with Smash. Like, no matter what, it's got Pikachu in it. You can't beat that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Smash has just such an unrivaled casual appeal that 90% of the people who play this game aren't playing it in tournaments or competitive. Might not even know what an EVO is.
More than 90%. It's probably like 98%.
You're right. That game is like
It's recognizable characters.
Yeah,
Actually,
it's got.
what the math is. I'm curious now.
Mike is going to tweet it like in an hour, and I'm going to know about it.
2% sales is 300,000 people. That's probably about as many people as enter Smash majors.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Just about.
But not even one, just like a conglomerate of them, right? Like, it's crazy to think about. I mean,
casual appeal. Yeah, casual appeal is such a big deal. It's that's why you see games like Mortal Kombat. So hold on, I know a lot of casual players love Mortal Kombat.
Just buy the hell out of it, right?
Yeah,
regardless of EVO.
They're putting RoboCop, and people are going crazy about it. So you know what
People
I'm
are
saying?
going crazy about that.
They may not have a particular favorite character per se, but they see RoboCop, like, oh wow, and they got the original actor doing the
voice acting,
the likeness of him. I mean, come on, like that sells in itself.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I was gonna say, people look at it and they're like, oh, I can beat Arnold Schwarzenegger with Joker's cane.
It's great.
It's a great time.
It's
fun for the whole family.
Better advertisement than any online could ever be.
Friendship.
And they brought the friendship back like
Hey, I'm really happy about that, by the way.
And then they're doing the stage fatalities and they're bringing back the Deadpool. I mean, come on, man. Like, who doesn't remember playing that 25 years ago? You know what I mean? So, like, come on. You know what I'm saying?
I mean,
like,
people that are
they just
younger than
have
25.
so much.
They don't, at least.
They've seen it at least, or they've heard the stories probably. But you know, like, it's just a mainstay. It's Mortal Kombat, and well, let's not get into all of that. We'll talk about.
I will say this because people keep bringing up Smash and online, right? I will, without any knowledge of any internal processes that are happening at Nintendo, I will guarantee you that they are already considering if they ever make another Smash game or a major update to this game, like another season or whatever, whether or not they should switch to rollback netcode, how much it will cost, and how much effort it will take. And you know why I will guarantee you of that? Because the one thing that Nintendo really cares about above everything else is the quality of what they put out.
Yes.
Okay.
Right? Nintendo, as a first-party company, they treated a bunch of those IPs that have been given to Smash with more respect than the original developers have recently. And I'm not going to name any IP names, but you can think of them yourself. But like Nintendo cares very much that whatever they put out is like the shining star of things that you can do. And if you look at the production value of Smash, it's incredible. Right? Yes, they're still using a bunch of the same old engine things that they were using, but look at how many stages, look at how the people that they paid for music, look at how many characters and which characters they went out and got. Look at the time that they spent putting work into every different part of that game. Like, you can tell that they really care. So I know that they're already talking about whether rollbacks are feasible or worth it or what. And I don't think that a poor showing is going to change that discussion, because I don't think they're having that discussion for the reasons that a poor showing would highlight, right? Like, they're not sitting there going, yeah, in bad conditions, our online is great. They're sitting there going, our online was passable when we made it, and it allowed us to ship the game on time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Chat has an interesting
they're aiming for
question.
greatness.
Okay.
And I really appreciate this question because I guess you would know this. Is rollback a significant issue for players more than 2 players at a time? Comparison to
No.
Okay. It is not.
Okay, so the way rollback works is each frame you figure out if you've gotten any new inputs from the past. You roll back as far as you need to into the past, and then re-simulate forward with all the new inputs until you get to the present again from the new past. Right. So in 4 players, assuming one of the players is your worst connection, because that'll always be true, right?
Yeah.
The amount of rollbacks that you will get will be proportional to what you would get if you were just in a 2-player game with that person.
Okay.
Because the other people in the middle won't make any difference, because the oldest inputs that you're getting on a regular basis are going to be from the person that you have the worst connection to. Okay. So if you properly implement rollbacks, and spectators for that matter, it won't be any worse than having a single game with the worst person that you're playing with, right? And that's true in everything.
Okay.
I mean, if you play a first-person shooter, the person with the worst connection to the server is going to be the worst performance in your game.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. That's the best explanation I could probably ask for regarding that topic. I mean, okay, so I know the most I really knew about that subject prior to what Mike just said was back when they did a write-up on Rivals of Aether, and they were talking about how they were trying to implement rollbacks, but their game is built in like Game Maker or whatever it was, and that engine, as mentioned previously, is not made for this kind of thing. So when they had to like jerry rig on top of everything, the simulations required, and it was just completely unfeasible to ship the game at a reasonable frame rate, right? So they did lockstep because that doesn't require simulations, or so I understand it. So, I mean,
doesn't require resimulation, yes.
There you go, right? It doesn't require one of the key elements of like a rollback, so you don't have to do stuff like that. Here's hoping they're able to revisit that down the line, but at least we know, right? It's really it really does go to show that an online tournament community, this is a lot of work that we're talking about, right? We're talking about developers who have to spend a lot of time and resources to make this thing possible, right? But then we're talking about a lot of players who have to change their perspective on how they play online tournaments in order to participate in an efficient manner. And then we're talking about tournament organizers who have to reevaluate the questions that they prepare themselves for months in advance, right? And go for it, Mike.
Oh no, I'm doing this so you can when you're done.
All right, and I guess the question is like, when we walk away from this, okay, July 31st happens. We don't know what's going to happen, but it happens. July 31st happens. August 1st happens. Next year, all things assuming go well, we don't have to do this again.
2020, it's going to feel pretty fucking real to you.
and then it happens, and then we go to EVO 2021, and the Mandalay Bay is open again, right? Mm-hmm. No problem. What is the impact here, right? Like, how much change can really be made? Is this going to change how online events are looked at, or is this just us coming up with something to kill time for a weekend? I mean, what
you
really walks away from it?
Particularly, I don't think this stream is.
No, not this stream in particular. I think the FGC in a whole. Like, no, we're not. I'm not talking about me. I mean, just like the overall efforts being made.
If it goes well, I could actually see the people that weren't going to EVO to be bros wanting many more online events, right? Because, like, put it this way, even if this costs $80 to enter, again, I don't know what EVO costs, maybe it costs more than $80. If this costs $80 to enter, but I can enter from my bedroom in Novosibirsk and not have to buy a plane ticket to the United States, I would love for there to be more online events if this works well, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would like the same thing. I mean, I think it kind of happened regardless, because, like as I mentioned, there's just been so many online like locals now that they don't really have a choice, right? I don't necessarily think all of them are going to walk away from the model when they can finally reopen. I mean, these guys, Ronin Rumble has never had a local, but they're doing it, right? And they're doing it with games that don't have good online, but they're doing it, and it's turning out to be pretty successful. I think they're doing a great job. And you know, you have like NLBC having their online. I don't think that's going to go away for them necessarily. It's just that, you know, the question was like, originally was like, oh, are they going to cancel EVO? Is there no EVO? You know, there was Combo Breaker gets canceled. There's no Combo Breaker online, to my understanding. You know, these majors get canceled, and that's just it. We'll see you all next year, all things willing, right? So I guess, you know, just to kind of wrap the discussion up and kind of put it in a box is like, if we go to these crazy lengths to prove it happens, are people going to want more of it later? You know, are people going to be willing to deal with this later down the line when it's just optional? We're just doing it for fun instead of necessity. I mean, necessity is a strong word, right? But there's no other way to put EVO on a stream otherwise.
Come with me down the cynical avenue for a moment.
Sure.
And imagine that this goes decently well.
Okay.
And EVO is able to charge the same entry fee and the same per game fee that they can for a regular EVO for one of these events. But they no longer have to negotiate with a hotel. I mean, I'm going to bet that they get the boardroom for free as long as they promise they can fill up a certain number of rooms for the hotel. Or not boardroom, the convention center. But probably not the Mandalay Bay, right? They don't have to manufacture lanyards. They don't have to pay people to show up on time. They can pay them less because they're working in their bedrooms or have fewer people or whatever. They don't have to put together a stage. If you're really cynical about it and they can make more money doing the online one, that might be a really compelling reason.
Okay. It might be, right?
I don't know how cynical to be, but that's a seriously cynical approach.
Okay, but then the question is that is that's dependent on whether or not we have games worth doing every year, right? Like I mean, I'd love if they just put all these games that I play, like Skullgirls and Fantasy Strike and Power Rangers and all that stuff. I love if they were EVO main stage games. I don't even care, you know, like that would be my ideal situation. But I mean, people register in insane amounts for these, you know, Dragon Ball games and Street Fighter and other games with less than optimal online situations. So I guess the situation you're proposing to me, I'd agree with if the games that they are able to offer have compelling registration numbers, right? I don't like. I understand EVO Grand Finals. A lot of people are going to watch, but I don't know how many people are going to register to smaller games necessarily, right? Just because the fact that they can, right? Like,
well, then you have to get into like, are those games smaller partially because EVO announced that they were not going to include them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
If the first year EVO had been like, we're not including Street Fighter V, what do you think that would have done to the game?
okay,
I mean, it would have been stupid for EVO to do that because it already had the brand of Street Fighter behind it, but like, you can't really unpack what comes from what because we don't have a great test case for it isn't already something that people think are going to be popular and then it is included, or it is something that people think is going to be popular and then it isn't included, right? I mean, we sort of have one in Unist, right?
yes.
Because Undernight was like
Sam show
going well, but Onus was going, Unist was going great, and then EVO was like, yeah, we're not including it this year, and everybody dropped it for the things that were going to be included in EVO. So, like, Unist was having like 240 person tournaments, and then the announcement that it wasn't included in EVO happened, and then it was dropped from a lot of tournaments, and the ones that had it went down to like 30 people. So it does actually make a huge difference to the game itself if it's known in advance that it's going to be part of EVO. I mean, look at BB Tag, right?
Right.
So that ecosystem is really difficult to like pick apart, and we don't know whether a smaller game will stay small or a bigger game will stay big based on it being included or excluded from the event that is looked at as the Olympics of fighting games, right?
Yeah. Okay. Understood. I mean, I really, okay. My expectations, just to kind of put it out there, is that I want, and to some extent, I know that there's going to be a spotlight on games that have been doing it right for the past few years that deserve to have the light shown on them by EVO in some capacity, right? Like, these games have side tournaments, sure, but there needs to be a bigger effort than that necessarily, right? Because those side tournaments, they're run by people who are already playing the game, and their audience are people who already play the game, not EVO in general, usually, right? So, I mean, it's my hope that the efforts being made, and it's good to have this discussion earlier than later, because if we talk about it too late, then there's already a ton of time put into things that are going to be just generally unproductive, in my view. That we put a spotlight on games that have been doing it right for years, or games that are coming out that are doing it right, or things that have been overlooked previously that need to have, I mean, another spotlight on them. I mean, hell, they're willing to put a spotlight on Marvel 2 again after all this time, right? Like, there needs to be a spotlight on things that are, I guess, forward looking in the FGC, at least in my opinion. That's just really what I think needs to be done.
There's a lot that goes into a game being good or not, and I mean, like, if I made something in 2 weeks with Legos or whatever and it had rollback, I don't really think that would be a reason to include it in EVO,
the rollback Lego. That's
right. Like, there is also is it a decent enough fighting game to be included? And I think that is it a decent enough fighting game to be included should have been EVO's bar and hasn't been. They, I'm sure, know this because Wiz still has me blocked on Twitter. But
Oh, nice.
I don't just think it's about having good online. I think if you're forced into an online environment, it certainly is about having good online. But I could see, assuming I do not have any insider information, right? I could see EVO picking KI and MK because they were large games that also did online correctly.
Yes.
I could see them picking Street Fighter V because it sort of does, and it's a large game. Like, I could see this going a whole bunch of different ways, and that it's not just games that have the correct technology that they would pick, because like it's a difficult thing to say that a game deserves to be in the spotlight.
Yeah.
Right. Like, as someone who made a game that a lot of people say deserved what it never got, from EVO, I find it more difficult to say that, right? Because we didn't have a giant marketing juggernaut. We didn't have a brand. We did a bunch of things correctly. No fighting game is for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
it doesn't matter what you make. There are going to be people that are like, this is garbage. I don't understand why anybody plays it. I'm going to go back to watching someone eat on Twitch or whatever. It's difficult to say deserves anything. I think there is definitely deserves to have been given a chance
Yes.
for a bunch of games, but deserves to be an EVO, I think, comes down to gameplay and gameplay only.
Yeah.
So, like, whether or not they're forced into this with the online portion is separate. But
I will say this.
Sorry, I talked for a lot.
No, that's great. No, it's great because I think it goes over something that I've never really said on the podcast, but I've previously said just to other people, which is that fighting games with good online are fun first and good online second. I think I said that on Reddit somewhere or something like that. Chaff in the chat knows better than me. But I agree with that, right? Like, gameplay is paramount. It should be. It should always be. You should never make a lame. I don't know. I don't think you intentionally walk yourself into a situation where the game is lame and then the online is really good. I don't think you can do that. Maybe you can if you intentionally do it, but I don't think anyone who does that, the level of money required to get it done, necessarily does. Maybe they do by accident. But I fortunately have the opinion that all the games that I think that should be going to this potential EVO Online and getting the showcase, they are fun. I think Scrolls is fun. I think Fantasy Strike is fun. I think, Fight of Animals is fun. I think all the Code Mystics SNK games are fun. I don't have any problem with those games. I arguably find them more fun than some of these other games people are playing, but that's just me. I don't play like a whole lot of anime to begin with, so that's like a different story in and of itself. Yeah, you're right. Gameplay is tantamount to everything. So, I mean, I think with that in mind, there's probably going to be one or two tournaments, maybe invitationals, maybe regionals, maybe something like that, where they bring out a game that's like Grand Blue or something. But it's only like the guys in the SoCal area or something like that, and it's like a invitational bracket, and they're all really close to each other. So, most likely there won't be issues, or at least not a significant amount. But if you ask me, the games that have open registration should all be the best of the best in terms of gameplay first, good online second, right? Not gameplay first, bad online second. That's kind of the situation.
This is a topic that's slightly closer to my heart, right? I think for a long time that EVO should have been choosing games based on quality rather than newness.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we don't have any insight into their process or whatever, even though there were a bunch of articles like Tekken 6 added to EVO. Also, Bandai Namco is now a sponsor, right?
Yeah.
So,
right.
However cynical you want to be about any of that, we don't actually know. But I do think there has been a trend toward choosing to show off the newer games, which makes it more of an exhibition than an Olympics, right? Like, if I invented football 2, it wouldn't suddenly be in the Super Bowl next year. It would be played for a bunch of time, and then people would decide whether they like it or not, and then it might end up having its own series based on that.
Uh-huh.
Whereas, like, right now, EVO has become a showcase for what's new rather than a showcase for what's good. I mean, the Cooperation Cup for Third Strike got 500 entrants, and it was Japan only, right? And it was offline, and it was like, it's the thing that the Third Strike community in Japan does every year. I don't think if you put 3S back in EVO as a thing that it would do poorly at all.
Yeah.
there's little hope of that ever happening because that's not the game Capcom is trying to sell right now, and it's not the new thing that they can monetize, right? I would like to see this situation make EVO rethink what it's including and why, rather than just, well, we did this once and it kind of worked and it kind of didn't, and now we're going back to being what we used to be next year, right?
Uh-huh.
That, if I had to choose any positive thing that could come out of this, whether it be developers choosing to incorporate rollback netcode, or EVO putting a spotlight on games that it necessarily hasn't necessarily put a spotlight on in the past, what I would really like to see is for it to go back to including the games that the community would really rather it include.
Absolutely.
Out of all of those outcomes, that's, I think, the thing that I would pick.
And you know what the crazy thing is, though, that, you mentioned, I mean, the crazy thing about it is that all of these games that I want at EVO aren't even that old. I mean, for God's sake, Power Rangers is how old now? It hasn't even gone through its second birthday, and it should be there, in my opinion. I mean, it's not new in the sense that it's not 3 months new. It's not Grand Blue new, but hell, it's new. It could be at EVO. Most of the games that I'm talking about have come out within the past 2 years. I mean, maybe that's too long of a time frame for me to really look at, right? Maybe it should be 3 months. Maybe it's whatever quarter the people who do the marketing for these games are, because different discussion, but esports is marketing.
I think 3 months is too short.
I think, yeah,
3
me
months
too.
is too short for quality gameplay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, if you look at the older EVOs, right? Marvel 2 was in it for a long time. ST was in it for a long time. 3S was in it for a long time. Like, and what you get out of that is much better gameplay when it's the game that's been around for 6 years and people know how to play it and people know what's good and new stuff has been discovered for years and years and years, instead of like first order optimal BS being the thing that's shown on stage, right?
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
I don't know whether that's marketing effective, but
right. I do watch EVO for, like, first and foremost the tip top competition. At the end of the day, it's at the end of the day, it's the biggest tournament. So that's sort of what I should expect to see.
But like, even if you look at other things, right? Look at the IDOM Capcom Cup run. That was way better play than anything that was featured in the top 8 of EVO the first year Street Fighter V existed.
That's true.
Because people had a long time to learn how to play the game first.
Yeah, heck, even Capcom Cup at the end of that year that it was first at EVO was on a completely different level.
Yep.
So, I mean, that really goes to show you, I mean, thing is that I think EVO kind of pigeonholes itself because they want to show things on a marketing budget and show what's new and what people should be buying because they want to have it like an FGC trade show type perspective, right? But then none of those games are viable. Whoops. Like,
I mean, you can't say none of them are viable. Like, not all of them are viable, but some of them are.
Okay, some of them are, right? But the ones they picked sure weren't. With the exception of, I guess, Street Fighter, right? You could, in theory, I play Street Fighter every once in a while, and I have a passing online experience. It's not as good as the other games that I generally put much more time into, because that's just, I play games online. That's my life, right? That's how I spend my leisure time. And when I look at it, those games, I mean, they're new, they've got great features, they've got good gameplay, but it's not what EVO's trying to sell, I guess. We have a question for the podcast. All right, quick question. We got to wrap up because I do have some other plans in mind, but I do want to address this. Do you think that the general accessibility mantra of recent fighting games are rooting towards games that are new? Okay, I don't know if I understand the question. It says, do you think that the general accessibility mantra of recent fighting games are rooting towards games that are new rather than old games doing their proofs? I don't know what you mean by proofs necessarily.
That have been proven.
That have been proven.
I don't understand the question.
Yeah, I don't understand the question necessarily.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've got words about accessibility sometimes, but
yeah.
I got words about accessibility. I don't think that games are approaching accessibility the right way. I think people are always like, Smash is really accessible. You can pick it up and it's got one button and you do things with the one button. And I actually completely disagree with that. I think Smash is one of the least accessible fighting games because to me, accessibility is not I can pick it up and flail around and my character does stuff. It's when I'm really trying to learn this intentionally, how often can I do exactly what I want?
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot in Smash that you just can't do until you practice it forever. I mean, even like if you're not used to playing things on a stick, even the difference between a tilt and a smash is like, right?
Yeah.
Can't.
Rivals added a tilt button, and it's great. Just
so Slap City, freaking great,
right? So yeah, exactly. So okay, So Smash is casual friendly because you can pick it up and flail around and you can do all the things that your character can do by pushing the control stick in different directions and hitting a button, right? But I don't necessarily consider it accessible.
Oh, yeah.
Smash did the thing where they tried to make everything available with no extra inputs and whatever, and what they ended up creating was something incredibly much more complex than that, which is not an accessible thing. I mean, even the concept of directional influence is like not what you would expect to do if you get hit by something. What you would expect to do is push toward the person so that you fly less far, which makes the game less fun. Yes, I think directional influence was the right choice, but it's also not an accessible thing to understand, right? Like it took Rivals tutorial to have a good explanation in the game of what directional influence is.
Yeah.
Like
I have been.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I have been playing Smash since literally the day the 64 edition launched in the United States. I still like people always ask me, they're like, "Oh, what do I do? How do I DI this and everything?" I'm like, dude, I have no idea. I have no clue.
I don't know. I bought the game because Samus is in it. Don't
ask me that question. Don't ask me
that. I would highly agree that Smash is not an accessible fighting game, just because there's so much stuff going on like under the hood that you have to understand to play with intentionality with that game. It's nuts. Yeah,
it is.
So okay, that's one version of accessible. The second version of accessible is like BB Tag, where they tried to keep everything your character could do but limit it to one button. And the traditional view of accessibility is like fewer buttons is better, right? I think that's backwards. I think that the most accessible you can be in a fighting game is having a separate defined easy input for everything. Like get rid of proximity normals. Keep like the Street Fighter 2 6-button system where like you push strong, you get a strong. You push fierce, you get a fierce. You push down fierce, you get a crouching fierce. And like you want to do that move, it's this one input. That's everything, right? BB Tag overloaded the button with so many things that trying to do like a walk up back end button or get crossed up and you were trying to do down forward, but you ended up getting down back. And like that's also not accessible because the concept of knowing which side of the other person is on and which side you're on is foreign for people that are learning how to play fighting games, right? If it's just I push my button and I get my move, that's much more simple for people to understand. When you actually look at people who are learning how to play fighting games, obviously the Dragon Punch is one of the hardest things for them to learn how to do. But also a quarter circle toward is surprisingly difficult. And then a quarter circle toward that's different when they're on the other side is even more difficult. One of the most accessible motions in all of fighting games turns out to be the 360, right? You don't have to care where you start. You don't have to care where you end. You just do it really quickly or while the other person is hitting you and the move comes out. The easy mode from BlazBlue was actually one of the they didn't call it easy mode, but everybody called it easy mode.
Yeah.
Was actually one of the closest things stylish. Yeah, that's right, because we don't want to make people feel bad by calling it easy.
Oh yeah. Marvel calls it simple. We can't have that.
Yes, that was one of the closest things that fighting games have done to being accessible. But like, to me, the way that you make a fighting game accessible is you assign everything important to a button. You try not to have more than like 2 overloads per button, right? And I'm talking about like standing and crouching is an overload, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
If you have to put forward on it, maybe occasionally put forward on some buttons, but for the most part, try to really avoid doing that kind of thing. I'm not an advocate for getting rid of motions, honestly, because motions serve other purposes than just forcing you to learn how to do a quarter circle toward. Right? If you have a quarter circle toward or a dragon punch that is a forward dragon punch, you can't be blocking at the same time as you're trying to do it.
Attacking. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So motions have a purpose and you can't just get rid of them without doing anything that accomplishes that same purpose. But there are other things you can do to accomplish that purpose. I actually think Blade Strangers and Granblue are excellent examples of sort of the better way of trying to do accessibility, right? Granblue does the cooldown thing where it's like, I mean, I I don't necessarily like the cooldown thing as it applies to like EX moves, because it's just like you get EX moves whenever you want.
Yeah.
But the idea of, if you don't want to learn how to do this complicated thing, you can still do the move and it's still got mostly the same properties, but you have to wait longer before you can do it again, is a wonderful way to let people approach the game. They still have separate buttons. They do have close and far, which is kind of crappy. But they don't force you to learn the motions until you want to be better at the game than just playing it, while sort of knowing what you're doing. Whereas if you look at Strive, right? Strive tried really hard to be what they think is accessible, which is like fewer chains. You don't have to worry about air teching. You don't have to worry about air blocking. You don't even have to worry about ground teching. That's not in your control anymore either. You roll automatically, even if you touch nothing. But they kept like the pop buster motion, or like double quarter circle towards supers, is like insane.
Yeah.
Right? If you're trying to go for accessibility, don't do that. There's no reason why I should have to do a pop buster motion if you're trying to get more people to play Potemkin. There's no reason why Heat needs to be a dragon punch motion if it's not air unblockable or even invincible. There's no reason supers have to be difficult, right? They did so much with like buffers and timing and RCs and cross-up protection and all the rest of the stuff that they had, and like no chip deaths, but then you still have to do really complicated motions to do basic junk with your character. And I just think that what most people seem to think accessibility means isn't the thing that actually makes games more accessible for people who don't play fighting games. It makes them more accessible for people who do play fighting games, certainly, right? If I already know how to do a pop buster motion, it's nicer if I don't have to care about all that other stuff that's going on in the game. I want to as a player, but like if I don't, not having to worry about dying from chip is nice, right? But if I don't already speak the language of fighting games with my hands, none of those solutions actually make it easier for me to get past wrestling with the controller and into punishing the other person for doing something dumb.
Right.
And I'm sorry, that was a very long thing.
Oh yeah,
but, like,
it's great.
That is a subject I think about a lot.
That I mean, people think about it a lot. I appreciate that there's a discussion to be had, right? There's a bunch of different attempts, right? Like, you got it, and it comes down to not even just gameplay. Like when I had David Serlin on, I started asking about the UI. I was like, why is the UI so essential to the game being accessible? And he's like, okay, yeah, but the UI, and there's also the gameplay, and there's also the sound design and the visual. There's just a million aspects to it, right? And you have to kind of go in every direction when you're talking about these things, because even if the FGC, going back, rounding it around to the topic that we've been discussing, if EVO is a trade show and it wants to bring people in so that they can see what fighting games are selling, it needs to do it the right way, right? The games, when they buy them, have to survive in their hands longer than 5 minutes. I mean, maybe some publishers don't necessarily care once they get their $60, but most of them do, honestly, with the crazy DLC plans that kind of come out. Like Grand Blue had a season pass like at launch, I think, something like that. It was like 2 days. Some wild plan. They care that this game exists in people's head for more than, the launch date, right? It's not like, the game comes out and we're done, right? And if they want DLC down the line, maybe we'll do it. Now, they have these things lined up months and years in advance, right? Every game does nowadays, even especially in the World of Live season.
Presentation that no one saw.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's it's tough to think about it, right? Because I mean, if they don't do it right, then those games kind of crash, and then the hopes and dreams of these games kind of fizzle out and die. But
yeah, but again, you're talking different languages, right? There is the language of the marketing department and the publisher who want to sell copies of the game, and there's the language of the designers who want to make sure that it has longevity in tournament. And as I said before, quite unfortunately, the FGC doesn't really matter for how many copies of the game you sell.
I agree. I agree
and
with that.
It probably is never going to, sadly, because it's not big enough compared to the casual market that it will actually impact something like that, right? Like Dragon Ball FighterZ being a Dragon Ball game made by Arc System Works and looking like that, it didn't matter how well it played in terms of sales.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. I mean, that game, with the immense amount of hype that it had going into launch, I mean, the fact that it's a half decent tag game is great, right? That's a blessing in and of itself, but the game didn't need to be necessarily to sell a million units plus, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that's really the discussion, I guess, right? When we look at EVO, July 31st and August 1st, they're going to happen. We're going to be back here, at least myself and a couple other people are going to be back here, and we're going to do an EVO recap of whatever happened, right? A lot of these things, hopefully, will be addressed, and hopefully most of our questions will be answered in a positive way, at least in my hope, right? I know a lot of people are cynicals, and the memes came out, and Chief Keef made a video, and people were talking about how the whole thing's going to crash and burn. Look,
I
guys,
don't even know who that is.
just some content creator. It's completely
Wow.
it's one of those things. It's like,
damn, bro.
It's one of those things that, like, I guess my last input on this would be, if I have to go another weekend on July 31st, August 1st, just playing fighting games or whatever, and not have to think about EVO aside from the really bad Twitter clip every once in a while, it's gonna suck. You know, that's gonna be a disaster state in my opinion, right? Like, I want to tune into EVO this year, guys. Don't make it hard on me to want to do that, right? That's really the only thing I think I want, right? Like, as a spectator.
I'm actually going to say exactly the same thing, which is, it would be nice if they picked SG, because I like SG and I like watching SG. The one thing that I don't want out of this event is, I would rather it never be, we picked all the big games and it was an online disaster, right?
Yeah.
Because that'll be funny for 5 minutes. And it will be devastating for like 3 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It just did not be funny anymore.
It'll be, yeah, exactly. I'll see one clip and I'll be like, you know what? I don't want to look at Twitter no more. And I'm going to hear about it for years, and people are going to talk about it, and it's like, I don't want that. I really want something good.
And fighting games have a bad enough rap in the regular gaming consciousness as it is.
Yes.
Like, the interview I did for Skullgirls, people were like, show me something cool in the game, because I don't really play fighting games. And it's like, if it was a racing game, you would at least pick up the controller and like press the gas, you know? Or that IGN year-end summary thing that they did, that they took down really fast, which was like, we don't have a year-end summary for fighting games because honestly, who gives a fuck about fighting games?
Wow.
Yeah, that was for like 18 or 19 hours, and then they changed it to like, we don't really have a retrospective this year for fighting games, so here's some clips from Mortal Kombat or something like that. That was hilarious. That was like 2011 or 2012, but like, fighting games are already looked at as really, really, really niche, and like, they're always going to be niche as long as 50% of the people that play lose, because that's the nature of how a fighting game works. But I don't think it would be beneficial in any way, convincing the developers or anything else, to have the event just be a giant disaster. Like, it's not, that's not a positive, and I would rather it be canceled if that's what it is going to be, right? So I'm hoping very much that it's not that.
Yep. I think that's pretty much the opinion at the table, at least. And with that, I would say that we have ourselves a show, because everything that I think we need to say about this has been said, at least of our personal opinions. And, you know, if anyone out there who watches this wants to question, you know, bring another aspect to it, feel free to reach out, feel free to DM me on Twitter, feel free to, you know, even just at me or anything like that, because this thing needs to be torn to shreds if it's ever going to be good, right? Like, people need to bring out every single grievance that they have, and there has to be a constructive evaluation of whether or not that grievance is worth their time. And these things have to be debated and really developed. I mean, we've talked about this, right? Go.
I would like to say one more thing, which is, I will guarantee you that the people who are considering running EVO Online are having every bit of this discussion and more stuff that we haven't thought about, because it's their necks on the line, right?
Yes.
And they're smart people to start with.
Yes.
Also, I hope someone makes the Terminator 2 quote into a video.
We'll see if we can get that done.
I was going to say, I do have one more question.
Proto, what you got?
Now, you hinted at this earlier. You say you don't have any insider knowledge, but I want to know, when is Lego Skullgirls?
Lego rollback? We'll do it here on the stream.
I'll see if I can get the license.
Let's do it. Let's make it happen.
Do it.
You have no idea how great misfortune would be in Lego.
Oh, yo.
I was just thinking like stop motion, like Lego guys, you know. And then
Oh,
like
so like a.
the end, the fatality is like somebody, a real foot comes down and like steps on the character, and
Oh,
then
no.
Hey, I'm into it. We can do like hey man, like you know, or Mortal Kombat's and it's just
like Clay Fighter.
yeah.
Or
Clay
Clay Fighter.
Fighter.
Shatter like Balls 3D.
Yeah,
Or
waiting
whatever,
on that.
right,
We're still waiting on Hanna-Barbera versus Capcom. It's
Oh
coming.
yes,
One day it's
it
coming.
will. that one's never gonna go away. All right, guys. That's about it for the show. I appreciate you coming on again, Mike. It's super productive discussion, and that's gonna be it from us on this side, at least for the podcast. If you're still watching and you want to watch Karnov's Revenge, stick around. There's gonna be a net play tourney in about 10 minutes. We're about to get started, so stick around and we'll be playing some very special
That's
games in a minute.
Balloon, right?
Yes, that's Balloon Game. We're playing
So I'll be there for it.
All right, dude. Yo, tune in. I mean,
do a balloon big tornado.
so stick around. Diz, I believe you're going to be on commentary with me, is what you mentioned for Karnov's.
Yes, yeah.
All
I'll
right,
be on.
perfect. All right, so we're gonna have that set up. So that's gonna be it for the end of the podcast, as usual. I'm Shibarizu. If you want to tune into more streams, follow the channel, follow me on Twitter. You know, follow all these excellent guys who've been joining me every week, and we'll see you all next time.